Welcome to The Grant, the EU funding podcast. The Grant. My name is Niels Tudor Winter, and I'm the creator, editor, and host of The Grant. The Grant is an independent podcast initiative with the ambition to dig into all corners of the EU R&D funding system on topics of interest for the full EU R&D funding community. The project officer is the key person for any project. It is the person that is the EU representative towards the project, and in this respect, their core responsibilities include securing well-run projects, deliverables on time, financial accountability, and all in all, that the projects are living up to the grant agreement signed with the EU Commission. There are, of course, many layers to these formal elements in the day-to-day work as a project officer. In other words, in my implementation series, I have reached the introductory episode about the project officers. It is not often that I'm able to get the point of view of the other side of the table, the Commission. And I didn't manage either for this episode, but I managed to get a former project officer on board. Sergio Ferreira, now Senior Innovation Advisor in Norway Health Tech, was an EU Commission project officer for 6 years. Hence, he has years of experience in the role. He introduces us to all the key aspects of the role and shares the different layers of formalities and social skills that is embedded in the role. Indeed, interesting for many of you out there. Please enjoy. The Grant. Welcome to The Grant, the EU funding podcast. Today, I will continue down the path of my newly introduced implementation series. And that's a series that is zooming in on what happens when you have received your funding. So it is a follow-up to my timeline series on the proposal preparation process, naturally. And I have a guest. Sergio, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Niels.
It's a pleasure and a privilege. Used to be the project officer of an EU project I was shortly connected to as a grants consultant. It was called Industries.
Mm-hmm.
We can get back to that, but it is in the capacity of former EU project officer that you are in the virtual podcast studio today. But before we dig into that, can you share with the dear listeners a little bit about yourself, short introduction?
Sure. So I'm actually a Portuguese national living in Norway, Oslo, and in between have lived about 13 years in Brussels, working for the lobbying industry and then for two agencies actually of the European Commission. So the EASI, Executive Agency for Competitiveness and Innovation, and then EASME, so the Executive Agency for Small and Medium Enterprises, where I was a project officer managing grants to innovation projects. For training, I'm an environmental engineer specialized in energy efficiency and eco-design. And then along the way, I did also an MBA to add on the business acumen to the technical expertise, which was a pretty good complement to the job I did in the European Commission. Now in Oslo, I work for a cluster, Norway Health Tech. So I'm actually a senior innovation advisor, and my job is to advise companies on how to bring innovation faster to the market, or on how to translate the products that are mature enough from their research work into innovative solutions or products, implement them on the ground, create market value, and then patient value. So that's me in a nutshell. I like cooking. I like gardening. I have a large garden just outside Oslo. And many of my friends ask me how many hours that garden takes off me. And I always say how many hours that garden gives to me. I don't have a shrink. I don't have a psychologist. That's my therapy ground.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a nice decoration. The thing is, I've been working in a flower gardening for 23 years.
Hmm.
From I was 9 until I left. So that was from 1986 until I left to Brussels in 2010.
Hmm.
So I myself am a earth person, so to say. So yes, I do love the gardens, and so I can very very well understand your perception of having it as a therapeutic. Uh,
Absolutely. There's no internet connection there. My phone never goes with me. There's no schedule. Sometimes I can go, a good part of the day without, eating anything because I just get entertained and I forget about it. And then there's a very big upside. I'm in a web meeting with whomever, and sometimes things don't go according to plan, and you just need
mm,
a breather, right? So I
yeah.
love going to the garden and just getting some berries or some plums or apples that are not they're not biological, they're not organic, they're not anything. They're
Uh,
just normal apples, without
mhm.
any chemicals, without any labeling, without anything. So I think nothing beats that.
No, it's nice. It's unfortunately today it's not a podcast about gardening, but it would have been a nice conversation.
But it's a good compliment,
Indeed. Anyways, now we're going to talk about things where you do need to go in the garden afterwards. Probably also for people, all the dear clerks sitting in the EU institutions, and I know some of you guys are listening out there. So now you will be represented today very well in this show, which. And let me just qualify that a little bit, which you have not been yet. I've had people on the show on episodes that are former employees, but without digging into what you actually do behind the glass doors and glass windows in the buildings in Brussels. But this is what. And the only reason why you have not been represented yet, that's because the institution you work for, you, you everybody have been approaching there. As soon as I mentioned that it's a podcast, there's a deep silence of tumbleweed coming through my email inbox. Nobody, it's almost like there's a fear of joining something like this. It's very weird. Apparently, the approval process in the commission for joining a podcast is a nightmare. And anybody that I approached, if they have checked with their managers, has been a huge no. So yeah, that's weird. Given the fact that you are having attendance from your commission representatives in webinars, hour-long webinars where its principle is exactly the same. It stays on the internet and you can't change it afterwards. So, yeah. Yeah, but maybe you can share a little bit about if you know. Do you know anything about that before we start on the subject?
Well, it's part of a job of a member of staff to promote the benefits of the EU and the project of the EU,
Exactly.
and the value that is created via the EU funding, EU projects. But then there's also another side, which there's maybe a bit of frustration. There's a bit of let's say some cases that some projects that don't go so well, and people have a tendency to hook on that, and it may be difficult for the communications unit or for the management to kind of let's say keep good control of that, and that's why they probably are not too positive about it. But you see people going to conferences and speaking. You see people going to, like you say,
Yeah.
webinars and all sorts of events. Maybe you're just not the right person, Niels.
Yeah, I think you know what, because I've been talking with other podcasters about it, and so some of them have the theory that there are specific media channels that has been agreed internally in the commission that has been approved as like approved channels to go to. That's that. So being an independent podcaster like this, with no, I don't even have. Now I have a VAT number. I didn't used to have that. No, I'm just spare time initiative, right? It's not what it might make them nervous when it's not an established media channel, or I don't know.
I don't know if there's really an internal vetting process or not, but I would say there's a risk, and I think in these kind of podcasts where people tend to speak more freely, maybe there is some risk for the institutions, and they are careful about that, of course.
Yeah, definitely there's something about, because if I was if I had the media accreditation, for instance, something like this for Brussels, for the institutions, then it would be a totally different case. There's definitely something around this being a free bird, Yeah. Well, anyways, let's not circle too long or too much around my frustrations about getting the commission in here. Now I have a former commission representative in. That's very, very nice. Not even because you can speak more freely. So
I can.
Might even be better. So, Sergio, today we're going to talk about the role of the project officer, a role that anybody who has been involved in the area of EU funding will eventually have a relation to an EU project officer.
Mm-hmm.
Short fly-in on the role as a project officer.
Well, if you want to be quite succinct, and of course then we drill down into the detail, the role of a project officer is to support the implementation of calls that the European Commission draws. So the calls are driven, by the DGs, and then there is an implementation body, which is the executive agency, typically, and the project officer is the one of the let's say staff members that picks up call, does an evaluation, recruits experts, does contract preparation, follows up the project with technical and sometimes a bit of financial angle with the support of a financial officer, then does review of periodic reports, and basically initiates the payment, the different payments for the project. So it's quite instrumental when it comes to policy implementation, because policy is implemented via projects in not all cases, of course, but in many. So it's an important job to do implementation. The other one is to bring feedback from the market, from project results, from the impact of that project back to the European Commission to inform better policy.
Yeah, it's a nice sum up. And all that we're going to dig a little bit into detail in this episode. So we're going to start with the EU Commission's role as funding holder. So the block, so to say, the institutions, so the entities. You mentioned already, sort of summed them up here, but maybe so the entities that are responsible for the funding schemes. So how is the let's look a little bit into the responsibilities here, because you have a working program that's being formed, DGs, and then you have the executing arm of the agency. But there's a little bit more to it than that. So can you put a little bit meat on what you just outlined?
Yeah. So I think it's a very long process. So the framework programs typically last for 7 years. And if you look at FP10, so we have now a program, Horizon Europe, that will last until 2027. And then there's already work starting to prepare the FP10, so the successor of Horizon Europe. So there's one DG that is, and here I'm focusing on the research and innovation programs. There's EU for Health. There is the European Defence Fund. There's a lot of other funding programs. I'm focusing mostly on Horizon as I think maybe not the biggest, but one of the biggest research innovation programs in the world. So there's an agency, DG Research that owns the process, or is at least coordinating the process, grosso modo. And then within the framework program, there is a number of pillars, and within those pillars, there's different clusters or different small programs that are owned by different DGs, or sometimes a group of DGs, right? So it's not always one DG that is contributing to, not always only one DG that is contributing to a specific part of the program. It's cross DG collaboration, because more and more calls also have cross-sectoral implications and requirements. So then there is input from multiple DGs, and I think how it starts is a set of consultations with in between the DGs, with the public, with the member states. So there's what is called a program committee, or several program committees for the different parts of the framework program. So there's a number of consultations, and topics start being put on the list, and then there is quite a long negotiation. There is a lot of studies, a lot of impact assessments done to narrow down what will be the content, and then what will be the structure of the next framework program. Yeah, so the program committees, they're basically participated to by representatives of the different member states or associated states. So Norway, for example, has also colleagues that sit in the program committees. And these colleagues can come from the ministries, can come from the national research councils or fora, or whatever you call it, or the innovation agencies, depending on which type of program. So there's a very comprehensive process to prepare this program. The framework program, involving a lot of very different parties, stakeholders, inputs from all over Europe, over probably a 3 to 5 year period before the program is launched.
It's a long cycle, yeah.
It's a pretty long cycle, yes.
And so just to all this that you've actually very briefly, beautifully described, that is sort of summing up the process of how the strategic research content, or the strategic call text content, ends up being there. It's structuring from the very, very broad taking the political back curtain into consideration, and then all the input channels from technology platforms, from European partnerships, from the Commission's own perception of what it's supposed to look like, and then coordination between the DGs, the ownership they have of crossing the different parts, because then you also have the European partnership. Some of them have circular biosphere Europe, for instance, or ACE Process for Planet, have their own parts and so on. So it's eclectic, cacophonic work, so to say, to coordinate all this. And DG RCD is dealing with that overall coordination, as you just explained. Yeah.
Yes, I think they build the structure. For this to all these inputs to be cooked together to some extent.
Yeah.
And it's an extremely complex job. So there will always be someone that complains about the job that the DG does, and someone that is very happy. And end of the day, the fact is, you need to give them some merit for the job they do. It's complex, and the set of rules that you need to follow that cover 90 plus billion euros worth of funding. It's they're complex, but all things considered, given the breadth of sectors that is covered, the breadth of type of funding instruments that is put forward, the type of calls, type of partners that is involved, everybody working under grosso modo one set of rules, that's quite impressive. So they have achieved a lot. They have crystallized a lot along the way. But there's still room for improvement, and there's a lot of frustration, both inside the institutions and outside the institutions with the funding that can still be ironed out.
It's unavoidable. It's unavoidable. Yeah, it's like this. But it's given the task at hand, it's actually incredible. The what is coming out of it, no matter it's extremely complex. It's actually managing to get a rather well functioning funding scheme out of it, given the size. No, so that's the one side of the yeah.
We actually forgot to mention one other actor, which is the lobbying world. So Brussels is populated by I don't know the exact number now, but at the time that I lived there, I think it was close to 3,000 different lobbying offices. And there's large industry, small industry, and there's research, there is innovation, very large groups that, for good and bad, everybody has their own agenda, but they all try to give input and influence what will be in the next framework program. So I think that should not be underestimated, that of course, the European Commission has the right and the pen to write the program. There is, a lot of drivers from within. So the policy dossiers that, the individual DGs and the individual units are dealing with and want to see reflected in the work program. All that is, of course, very present. But there's also external influence that cannot be, I think, underestimated.
I've been one myself. Yeah, it's you have they're filled. You have lots that and I was always very positively received by the Commission representatives that I've been dealing with when you have something to say. Yeah. So yes. Yeah, but it's no matter. So we just described the complexity, but still, they actually are very receptive to setting up a meeting, having a talk, and hearing what you have to say.
Yes, because the European Commission can, outsource as many impact assessments or reports as they want, but there's only so much that can be captured in those reports. So if they get the voice from the industry or the voice from, the researchers that are working on the ground, that has a lot of value. So they will want, when, like you say, when there's something to be said, they will want that input. And, to some extent, they depend on that. Otherwise, the European Commission would be too isolated from from what's happening on the ground, from the reality. And they don't want that, obviously.
Yeah, it's indeed. But this is I've underlined this also in previous programs when we touched the topic. I have nothing to say about the Commission and its attitude towards setting up a meeting. There's always been a welcoming attitude, no matter who I've been approaching. So that really, this is something that I always underline. No, correct. And then we have the operating arm, that's the agencies. That is a handful, a good big handful or two handfuls of organizations that they are institutions under the EU, but they are independent now. How does it work? Do you remember?
It depends on how you look at it. So the heads of unit, I think they are seconded from the parent or mother DG. And each executive agency has one or more mother DGs. Right?
Okay.
So there's some degree of independence, but then there's still, reporting that needs to be done to the DG. That gives them the budget and program to implement. So I think they are independent. They're they have their own ways of working and procedures, but they're all vetted by the European Commission. But I think then we get a lot into the legalities of the establishment of the different
we don't need that.
agencies.
No.
And I think there's a lot of different agencies, from executive agencies to observatories to I actually don't know the terminology, but the European Medicine Agency, or there's very different types of agencies. I think the job of project officer is primarily sitting on the executive agencies or the joint undertakings. So, when you have these joint undertakings, they also have a program. They also have project officers that run the grant or do the grant management and grant administration.
Yeah. So you need to keep steady out there. So here you have DGs, and they have different response. So you have the DG RTD, that is the overall responsibility for the preparation of the whole work program. And then you have different DGs that are responsible for different parts under there for content and other stakeholders like the European partnerships. And then you have on the implementing side, so to say, so administrating the projects when they have been funding. There you have agencies covering also different areas. But is that calibrated? Do you remember if it's calibrated which parts they take care of? For instance, you have the one taking care of the SMEs. You have the ones that take...
Yes, of course. So I worked, this was back in 2011 to 2014 at EASI. So it was the Executive Agency for Competitiveness and Innovation. And, my unit was just dealing with the Competitiveness and Innovation Program. So it was just dealing with one specific program. Then it was translated into EASME, and then it included several programs. So it was the LIFE program, it was the raw materials cluster within Horizon Europe, it was the Maritime and Fisheries Fund, it was the SME instrument at the time that then became the European Innovation Council. So there was a range of programs. Each of those programs was delegated to the agency by one of the mother DGs.
So that's that. Now, I think with that, we've covered the Commission's role as funding owner, right? Is there anything else we need to, before we move into looking at the project officer?
I think there's we're talking about the DG as a black box, but there's a lot of different bodies there. So there's let's say the policy DGs, and then there's other bodies that deal with internal audit or the anti-fraud, OLAF anti-fraud office. There's a number of supervisory bodies, so to speak, to which the executive agencies also have to take into account. So whenever you sign a grant agreement, for example, it's specifically said that specifically written there that you're granting access to for example, the OLAF office to come and do an investigation, or to the audit team to come and do an audit. So there's a lot of different bodies that need to be articulated, not just let's say policy-oriented bodies inside the European Commission, but also other.
How is it? So, does each DG has representatives from these, from Olaf and from the audit, or is that one central body? How does that work?
Olaf is one central body, but then I think I actually don't know how Olaf works, but I assume they have staff that is dedicated to certain areas. But each DG and the executive agency is the same. They have internal control colleagues. So there's almost like an internal audit team that keeps first degree of control on the functioning of the agency. But the policy officers, the project officers or the financial officers are the first degree of control for the projects, and then that can be scaled up depending on the situation. If there's a challenging case, you liaise with the audit team or with the legal team inside the agency, and then if there's really a problem, you escalate it to other bodies. One of them being the anti-fraud office.
Yeah. So the main section of departments in the DG would be, so you have the finance, you have the project officers. What other sections would be? Of course, management, but H&R.
Yeah, you have HR, you have communication, you have ex post audit, you have ex ante audit, you have internal control. But I think the job of the project officer is basically being the link between whatever projects you are handling or dealing with, and then liaising with the right internal department. So I recall projects where some questions got out of my comfort zone. So then I would liaise with the internal legal team, and we would have a continued dialogue to either help project, help clarify something, or sometimes enforce some rules and requirements.
Okay, we need to keep an eye on tie here, so we need to, I think we covered it quite. People should have a pretty good understanding now of how the Commission as an institution handles the funding schemes. Now, the project officer is the most outgoing representative from the Commission vis-a-vis the beneficiaries. You're the face of the Commission, so to say. Yeah, or you were used to be. But the project officer as an institution, so to say, or as a role, that is the face of the Commission in terms of the money that has been carried, been given or awarded. Now, let's have a look at I labeled this part, the project officer, your side of the table. Because here in this podcast, I've had a lot of people that has been receiving money. So there's a lot going on in most of my episodes with how do you make a proposal for approaching the money? How do you deal with the funding when you have received it? How do you approach the Commission if you want to influence? So how do you work as a beneficiary? How do you work as a university or as an industry, and so on and so forth? So it's the first time actually zooming in on what happens on the other side of the wall. So we should, this is the official, the grand introduction to the project officer role. So maybe we should outline a little bit the responsibilities. And having worked so many years with this from my side, I know I've sort of sketched out the bullets here. But maybe you sort of take us through what is actually the responsibilities for the officer.
So I think I wouldn't say that the project officer is the face of the European Commission. That's a very bold statement. I would say that the project officer is the first point of contact, right? So if there is a grant that needs to report, needs to be signed, needs to be whatever, the first contact is with the project officer. But the job of the project officer starts well before there is a grant to be signed, right? So you are delegated a program. So the executive agency receives a program that is delegated from one of the DGs. It comes with a list of topics and the call description for each topic and a budget allocation for each of those. And then, project officer gets allocated this topic or that topic. And in some topics, there will be one application funded. In some other, there will be, 10, depending on the budget, depending on the priority set by the European Commission. So the first job is to really organize launch the call, of course, when it's published in the funding and tenders portal, but then organize all the evaluation. And that's looking into what the call requirements are, what the expertise needed is, and create a pool of experts that then external experts that will come in to do the evaluation, lead, so train, not train, but brief those experts, lead the evaluation exercise by those experts. By my time, it was mostly done in Brussels. So we had what we called the central evaluation weeks.
Mm-hmm.
The experts all come together, and we, sit down for 4 5 days sometimes, to do an evaluation. Everybody gives their scoring. We discuss each proposal one by one in a group of 3 to 5 experts. All the scores are put together. We make a ranking list. We do cross-reading so that we calibrate across different cohorts, different groups of expert evaluators. So when we have this final ranking list, that needs to be approved by the hierarchy and the program committee.
Mm-hmm.
And then when that is rubber stamped, we basically start funding projects until we run out of budget for a specific budget line.
Mm-hmm.
So the ones that fall above the funding line, then they are, there's some internal investigation, or let's say some internal work to be done, but then they're invited to sign a grant agreement. So they're sent request for documentation. Yeah.
Just to everybody out there, it's perfectly clear. Evaluators, they hand in their scores, and then you are administrating that. So you take in the scores and then you rank them. Is that correctly understood?
Yes, but it's it's almost automatic process. So there is a tool called SEP, Submission and Evaluation Portal. I think it's the acronym.
Yeah.
So each expert goes in there and it gives their written assessment. So they write whatever their opinion is on that application, and there's 3 evaluation criteria with sub-criteria, and then linking to the comments that they put forward, they also put a score. And then there is an average calculated from the 3 or 4 or 5 different experts, depending on the different calls, and that is put together. Then there's a number of other criteria. For example, if there's an application or there's several applications with exactly the same score, then the score on impact gets more significant. So the one with the highest score on impact goes forward. Then there is gender balance. The one with better gender balance goes forward. Then the geographical coverage. The one with more EU member states covered goes forward, right? So there's a number of...
how is that the system that is going in, or do you have actual human beings sitting and say, okay, if there's same points, then we need to look at these criteria? Is that human? Are those human beings that goes in, or is it something
the system does part of it, and it's then verified by colleagues.
Okay.
So I recall doing sampling and going through each application to verify that the gender balance was such, or the member state coverage was such.
Yeah.
So then when you build this ranking list, it's, the project officer or the head of sector or head of unit that is coordinating this group of project officers, they of course control the work, but it's not their call. So the process is entirely I wouldn't say dependent, but the input to the evaluation comes solely from the expert evaluators.
Yeah.
I think the job of the project officer is to coordinate, to make sure that everybody understands their role, that everybody is calibrated in the way they are scoring. And that's why we do cross-reading across different panels of experts. And then there is a layer of quality control. So when you, as an expert, evaluator write the consensus report. So let's say the mashup of the 3 or 4 or 5 experts' evaluations.
Mm-hmm.
Someone comes in and reads that report, and this someone is also an external expert. So they read the report and check the consistency between the comments that you write
Mm-hmm.
and the score that you attribute to that specific criteria, to that specific application.
So, dear listeners, this is the ones of you that have submitted proposals. So this is when you receive your evaluation, so the evaluation summary report. That's what we're talking about here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the written,
Yep.
So you have your scores, and then you have some written comments about your proposals, and that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah. There's also a step there to avoid that there is inconsistency, right?
Yep.
So when we do quality, or the expert evaluators do quality control, they are recommended to avoid very vague statements that don't mean anything, but also very concrete statements. So you're not going to hook on specific numbers and specific messages from the application, because there may be a mistake, and then that rolls or unfolds complaints and a number of steps if the applicant comes back and complains.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because this is because there is a complaining procedure, and of course you need to make sure that all your steps are fully watertight, because the whole nature of the system requires that it's watertight, so you don't come into trouble as a funder, the funding scheme administrator. Yeah, so
you want to guarantee, or the commission or the agency, wants to guarantee that all applicants are treated equally,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
That there is no preferential treatment for whatever reason.
Yeah.
There's no mistakes in one application evaluation and not in another. So there's always the 4 eyes principle. At least 2 people need to look into everything that has been written, to kind of, guarantee is a very big word, but to try and prevent these kind of situations where there is, a doubt on the equal treatment of all applicants, which is a basic element in the evaluation of these goals.
So sort of a beacon of impartiality. You process information. You process the information.
I think it's a sine qua non. If you are a funder, you need to be impartial. You need to have absence of conflict of interest, and that's one of the criteria for selecting all the experts. You need to have a confidentiality, very tight confidentiality agreement. A lot of things need to fall into place, that no one comes and calls into question the decision to award that grant to that project, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
That cannot happen. Having said that, there is the opportunity to complain about your evaluation, but invariably, unless there is really very obvious mistakes in the text, what the commission does is to go back and verify that the process has been followed.
Yeah.
All the different steps, all the quality assurance and verification steps in the evaluation and the award of the grant or not, that the process has been followed. So that's what is usually done when you complain.
Yeah.
Unless there is really some, very obvious errors, I think very, very seldom there is a reopening of an evaluation for
and that's because, and you also know why that is. That's because beneficiaries approaching funding schemes with a rejection and get a rejection. Content, their complaint is often related to the content, of what they have submitted, what they want to do, descriptions of in the proposal document, and here the EU Commission, because I have to take it to you because you're not that anymore, Sergio, but the European Commission, you that's a watertight walls between you and the evaluator. So from your point of view, you check what you just described, that if everything is in place with that, there's nothing to come after, right? And as for the content, you can say, look, we have independent evaluators. That's the evaluating system. We have nothing to do with their expertise. They've been chosen. You might be able to put in question. You can always question the expertise of a person who's supposed to evaluate it, but they have been screened from your side, yeah. So and allocated. So that's that. You cannot. You can. Then you can. Yeah. That's part of the system. It's like this.
Yes, but you cannot really question the expertise of anyone, because you will not know. You will never know who were the 3 or 5 experts that evaluate your application.
That's true. Yeah.
So you will never know. But having said that, you can be. There's very competent people being chosen as evaluators. There's a very thorough process to allocate the right person, the right expert to the right application, so that they have a fair understanding of that technology, that solution, that process, whatever it is. But by definition, if you are submitting an application to the Horizon Europe, you have to be innovative, right?
Yeah.
So the likelihood that on the other side of the table, there's someone that understands your solution, your technology, as well as you do, is relatively low, right? Because you should be one of the few people in Europe that is working on that sector.
Exactly.
So you will find someone that can put it into perspective and understand what you're saying and the direction that you're going, understand your market, etc. But you can be very lucky that your application falls in the hands of this group of experts, and they all understand it, and they really like the journey that you have drawn and your go-to market and the market need you highlighted. Or your application can land on the hands of the experts just next door, which are always also very highly qualified, but they just come from a different background. Exactly. And maybe they have a little bit less understanding, or they have a different understanding of the same problem. And that can very easily be the rejection or approval of your application. And that's the reason why the Commission tries to do this cross-reading, so that if I read your application and you read mine, if we have the same scoring, everything's fine. If we don't, then there is some calibration that needs to happen, and then there's this consensus meetings that take place.
And it's not long ago that I had an evaluation panel double episode, and all of them agreed that the most challenging role or part of being an evaluator, that's the consensus meeting. Of course, because it is so. Because these are all they are evaluators. They've been selected, right? They have applied, but they have been chosen to be evaluated. So everybody has certain expert aura around. So you have a certain ego, might be the wrong word to use, but you have a certain position. Often people find themselves in a certain.
You don't want to be questioned in your assessment.
Exactly, So very it creates a lot of uncomfortable situation when there's disagreement about content or ways to carry out research or innovation processes or whatever. So yeah.
So you come actually to one of the maybe not the most important, but a very important skill of a project officer, which is to be a good moderator, so a mediator in a discussion, and to be a good negotiator. I think when you're sitting in these consensus meetings, of course it's the experts that need to agree and discuss whatever argumentation, but someone needs to be there to keep the blood pressure a little bit on the low side. I haven't seen experts fighting, physically fighting
yet,
but I've seen a lot of experts that they were really getting warmed up and starting to shout at each other. You are right and I'm wrong, or the other way around.
It's very fun. Yeah, but it's only funny because it's of course, these are people that are engaged with what they do.
Absolutely.
So of course you stand on your position, and that's what they also said. Then they admitted that they themselves would probably have been unreasonable at times in these meetings, because that's when you're a knowledgeable person within your area. You stand your ground. Yeah, so.
Yeah.
I think I labeled the function that you would have, the referee, in the evaluation
Yeah.
consensus meeting. Yeah.
But there has been an evolution of that process. So when I was hired back in 2011, I was hired for technical expertise, right? So I actually, knew substance,
Use something,
subject matter, what the experts were discussing. So I could, engage in the discussion, could, understand their arguments and try to put things in a different perspective so that everybody arrived at the consensus. I think, when I left in 2017, I saw most of the project officers being hired, having, of course, very highly educated people and competent, smart people, but they would be, more on the economics or international relations or lawyer training. So less engineers and less technical people. So that changed a bit the role of the project officer in the direction of being more a mediator than intervening in the subject matter or subject matter discussions.
It also makes sense, right? But it's a delicate role. I can perfectly understand. You need to be a born diplomat to to deal with that situation. No, this is going to be a double episode. I can see that, because we're not going to fall within. This is like this. It takes time. I knew it would take time, but it needs the attention it deserves. Anything else on the because you also maybe the communication part, because you also have a certain responsibility in relation to that. Yeah. So the project sort of making sure that the projects, they are disseminating, like there's a communication about this. So this is the role of making sure that the world announced to the world that Commission has funded a lovely research project with these results and so on and so forth.
Usually that's not done by the project officer. So there is, media material that is created by the agency's communication unit with input from the project officer. So the project officer is not supposed to, be publishing anything regarding to call results or anything, but it feeds. He or she feeds the communications unit to say, we have now finished the application, the evaluation, and we have awarded I don't know how many grants within this program. That's it. I think the project officer, so the implication on communications is more on kind of pushing or incentivizing the projects to do their own communications in a structured manner along the whole project, and to feed material from these projects to the communications unit to publish, success stories, or to publish some, really key highlight, or to make the bridge between some policy initiative and the project that is then aligned with that policy initiative and is delivering results, etc.
It's a nice bridge into, because now we're moving a little bit into the connection you have with the awarded projects under your responsibility. So let's move into this, the connection to the projects. And I have started out with, I've divided it into 2 blocks. There's a connection with Thanks for listening to this episode of The Grant. All the Grant episodes have their own site on the Grant website. You'll find the link in the episode notes where you listen to your podcast. On the site for this episode, you'll find a link to Sergio's personal LinkedIn site and a link to Norway Health Tech. Further, I will add some links to sites of added value for coordinators. Next week, you'll get the second half of this episode, since this one became a long one. There we look into the connection between the project officer and the projects that they administer, and how the work runs throughout the project period. And Sergio, of course, shares some advice for you all You can indeed look forward to that. Remember that the grant would really like to join some EU proposals as a partner or subcontractor. I am slowly getting interested feedback for having the grant included in proposals for 2025 calls. And why is that? That's because some proposal developers realize that adding sound to the proposal communication strategy can be a strong addition to connecting to the project stakeholders and the world beyond the realm of the project. For a relatively small part of the project budget, the grant steps into the communication and dissemination group and delivers a plug-and-play solution with strong podcasting expertise, 16 years proposal and project experience, and a big follower base. Reach out through LinkedIn or my website if interested. Finally, don't hesitate reaching out if you want your own podcast episodes flagging topics of importance for you specifically. Grant's consultancy company Inspire Science have their own series with 3 episodes flagging their capacities within different areas of supporting research organizations towards EU funding. The possibilities are many. Flagging your capacities as a company, pushing a message towards the Brussels ecosystem as a research organization, promoting an important event, or boosting your communication strategy. The grant offers a plug-and-play solution with a podcast host with 16 years of experience within the EU R&D field, which secures the solidity of the content. I'm not a journalist, I'm a conversation partner that understands your perception. See you next week.